SCP-538 is called the Shadow Spiders. I'm not a big arachnophobe or anything, right? I have a healthy fear of spiders as well as all insects that could potentially bite me and distribute venom into my body, okay? I don't like being bit by insects. I don't think anybody does. I'm not exceptionally scared of these things. Like, I know some people have a very real fear of spiders. So if you're one of those people, please cautiously approach this video. Other than that, we're going to react to it. It's by Dr. Bob. Make sure to subscribe to his channel and mine if you like reaction videos. And let's get into this animation.
An SCP Foundation doctor wearing a hazmat suit is escorted by 2 guards through the secure facility.
Look how worried he looks.
They stop in front of a large, sealed door, and one of the guards scans his security card.
Okay.
There's an audible hiss as the door slides open. The doctor nervously looks to the guard who motions him inside.
Go ahead.
They certainly won't be joining him. The doctor steps into the small airlock, and the door snaps shut. A complicated locking mechanism seals the door behind him. He's truly locked in.
He's
The reverse process then begins on the locked door in front of him.
All right.
It finishes, and the door opens, revealing a room with bright lights that briefly blind the doctor.
Okay.
As his eyes adjust, he can see that the entire room is white and bathed in an intense light. He steps out of the airlock and towards the center of the room, where his task awaits.
Turned a little bit.
He takes one slow step at a time, pausing for a moment after each before taking the next. The doctor wants to get this over with as quickly as possible, but he has to abide by the protocols, and this is how they dictate that one must walk in this containment chamber.
Weird.
As the doctor gets closer to the center, and his eyes further adjust to the bright light,
one step at a time.
He can finally see what this room contains. In the very middle of the room, directly under the lights, is a man. He's lying on a table and isn't moving at all, except for his slow, rhythmic breathing, which is assisted by the ventilator he's connected to.
Okay.
A feeding tube has been placed inside his nose, and numerous machines next to the man hum and beep as they measure his vital signs.
So he's basically on life support.
The doctor continues to take one slow step after another, and eventually, after what feels like an eternity, he reaches the middle of the room.
Okay.
The lights above the man are angled to create large, dark shadows coming off of him. And now the doctor is finally close enough to make out what he was warned about in his briefings.
All right.
Even though the man is completely still, the shadows are moving. Scurrying on the edges of the man's shadow are what look to be spiders, and big ones too, roughly 3 inches across.
Oh my God,
But the doctor can't see any actual spiders on the man. Only the shadows of these massive arachnids are visible as they move back and forth along the man's shadow.
What the hell?
The doctor is growing increasingly nervous. He can feel the sweat dripping down the inside of his hazmat suit, though he tries to tell himself it's just a result of the bright lights beating down on him.
Right.
The doctor reaches the machines measuring the man's vital signs and jots down their readings, marking down that the man's medically induced coma appears stable.
You could use
He's continually distracted from his work, though, by the movement of the spiders. One suddenly jumps from one part of the man's shadow to another, startling the doctor and causing him to jump back. The spiders abruptly stop moving, and even though he can't see their eyes, he has the feeling that they are looking right at him.
Oh, gosh.
The doctor is frozen
So
with
they
fear,
sense
staring right back at the spiders.
sudden movements?
But after a moment, they go back to their previous behavior and start crawling along the edge of the comatose man's shadows once more. The doctor continues to go down his checklist and audibly gulps. He's reached the final item, the one labeled physical exam.
Oh, gosh.
Nervous sweat runs down his face into his eyes, and he wishes he wasn't wearing this hazmat suit so he could wipe it off. He knows he must get much closer to the man, and more importantly, his shadow, than he feels comfortable with. He has to physically take the man's pulse, though. They won't let him out of this room if he doesn't. He reaches out towards the man's hand, slowly and carefully. He can see the shadow of his hand getting dangerously close to the man's shadow. And the spiders.
Dangerously
One of the spiders stops moving, as if it is watching and waiting for the doctor's shadow to get closer. It raises up on its hind legs, looking like it is ready to pounce.
Like it's gonna attack?
The doctor gets closer and closer to the man's hand.
Oh my gosh, dude.
When out of nowhere, The room is rocked by an explosion.
Oh no!
The doctor spins around, and on a monitor next to the airlock door, he can see a feed of the hallway outside.
Uh-oh.
The guards who had escorted him run down the hall as a red emergency light flashes.
That's not good.
He turns back to the man on the table. The spider that was waiting for him lowers itself out of its attack mode and goes back to scurrying along the shadow.
Okay.
The room is shaken by an even bigger explosion, and it suddenly goes dark.
Oh
The
no!
power must have gone out from whatever is
Everything's a
happening
shadow.
outside. He can hear the sound of muffled gunfire mixed with far-off screams, but both are drowned out by his nervous, heavy breathing inside of the suit.
I guess so.
The doctor drops to the ground and tries to crawl back to the door, but has no idea which direction it is. He hits his head hard and hears a crack come down his mask. That must have been a table. The doctor turns and crawls the other direction, eventually finding the airlock door. He stands up and bangs and pulls on the door, but it won't move.
That's
He
scary.
fumbles with his hazmat suit and finds the button for his emergency light. A chemical light comes on inside of his suit, casting his face in a sickly yellow light. But the light starts to flicker. Something must be malfunctioning. The light on one side of his protective mask goes out, leaving half of his face in darkness.
Shadow!
But that's the least of his problems, because all of his attention is now focused on the shadow moving across his face.
Oh no!
It's the shadow of a spider. His eyes go wide as the spider stops and stands up on its rear legs.
Oh no!
Arachnophobia, the fear of spiders, and sciophobia, the fear of shadows, are some of the most common phobias.
Fear of shadows, I
And
never heard of
today's
that.
SCP file is a terrifying and dangerous combination of both. I'm Dr. Bob, and
Hey,
this
Dr. Bob.
is SCP-538, also known as the Shadow Spiders.
The shadow spiders.
SCP-538 is what appears to be a kind of living shadow, not dissimilar to SCP-017.
The shadow.
Though these shadows always take the form of an unknown species of spider.
Right.
These anomalous arachnids seek out the shadows cast by other living objects, attaching themselves to the edge of the living creature's shadow in such a way that their own shadows aren't obscured.
Right.
Once attached to a shadow, the spiders will appear to feed off of them. This allows them to rapidly grow in size, with adults measuring a total area of roughly 15 square centimeters. Once they reach their full size, they will continue to feed, though this will only maintain their size. The feeding process seems to not impact the host in any way, and the spiders can remain on a shadow indefinitely. While the spiders have been observed feeding on the shadows of inanimate objects when no living creatures are available, these don't appear to provide the spiders with whatever nutrients they require. And they will slowly atrophy and decrease in size.
I see.
It is only when they are connected to the shadow of a living organism that SCP-538 can thrive.
That's weird,
SCP-538 are not locked to the shadow they are on, though.
Okay,
The spiders have shown the ability to move across areas to reach a new host, though they will decrease in size when not attached to a shadow, losing as much as 2 square centimeters of their size for every second that they aren't on a shadow.
Wow.
And should they be stranded in the open without a shadow to feed on, they will decrease in size until they disappear completely, at which point that individual instance of SCP-538 is considered to be terminated.
Okay.
The spiders normally avoid this fate thanks to their extremely fast movement, though, and fully grown instances have been measured moving up to 1 meter per second.
Wow.
While SCP-538 instances are usually quite benign, seeming content to simply live on the shadow of their host, they will attack if they are frightened, which is when the real danger presented by these anomalous arachnids comes to light.
What happens?
If the spiders are agitated, usually from the result of a rapid movement by its host, the spider will bite the organism's shadow before attempting to flee.
Okay.
Once bitten, the unlucky individual will progress through 5 distinct stages, all of which take place over the course of roughly 1 hour.
Oh no.
During the first, the subject will report pain in the area of their body that corresponds to the part of their shadow that was bitten.
Right.
No puncture wounds or other marks will be visible in this location.
Because it's a shadow.
Minor psychological effects have been reported in this stage, mostly consisting of an increase in irritability and the tendency for the bitten subject to lash out at those around them.
All right.
The second stage occurs 10 to 15 minutes after being bitten. The subject will begin sweating, despite reporting that they feel cold, while their skin will become red and warm to the touch.
Right.
25 to 30 minutes after the bite, the third stage will begin. At this point, the psychological effects become very noticeable, with the subject becoming violent and attempting to attack any person nearby.
Wow.
Their speech will be slurred, and they may show signs of impairment to their motor skills.
like drunk and mad.
The fourth stage begins at the 40 to 45 minute mark.
Not
and
good.
at this point, the subject's skin color will go from being red to a pale white as their core temperature drops 5 to 8 degrees Celsius. Their psychological state will alter once again. They will go from being extremely aggressive to overly apologetic, blaming their previous behavior on the fact that they weren't feeling well and weren't acting like themselves. After offering their apologies, they will then request their leave from the area and attempt to retreat to a darkened area. The fifth and final stage happens 55 to 60 minutes after the bite, at which point the subject faces a grisly end to the entire ordeal. Their entire body will rapidly dissolve into a translucent liquid, while at the exact same time, their shadow will disintegrate into numerous smaller instances of SCP-538.
Wow!
The spider offspring measure just 4 centimeters across, and the new instances will immediately begin seeking out shadows of their own that they can attach to and feed off of.
There
is currently no known cure for being bitten by an SCP-538 instance, and even death will not halt the process.
Right?
Instead, should the subject expire while in the earlier stages of the condition, death will cause the final step to occur immediately.
Oh, okay.
In a bit of good news, only bites to the area of an individual's shadow that correspond to a spot of bare skin seem to cause these effects.
Okay.
Even thin materials like cotton clothing appear to be enough to prevent the process from starting. The SCP Foundation has multiple instances of SCP-538 in containment, and they are kept in a white 15 by 15 by 3 meter room that is accessible only via an airlock.
Interesting.
4 200-watt lights are focused on a table in the center of the room, where D-class personnel in a medically induced coma is kept in a stable state, in order to serve as a feeding source for the SCP-538 specimens.
Right.
No other sources of shade are allowed into the room, so that the D-class serves as the only source of shadows.
Yeah, there you go.
Any personnel that enter the room, whether to repair a light source or to check on the condition of the D-class, are to wear sealed hazardous material suits equipped with oxygen tanks, and are advised that they must move slowly and deliberately in order to avoid agitating any instances of SCP-538. Initially, doctors sent to examine the D-class personnel were allowed to enter the room alone. However, following the events of Incident I-538-1, that protocol has been changed.
Right.
During the incident, an attack by the Chaos Insurgency caused disruptions to both the main and backup power sources to the part of the site where the SCP-538 containment cell is located, just as a Foundation doctor was in the middle of an examination of the comatose D-class. Power outage led to all lights in the containment cell shutting off, while at the same time sealing the airlock that provides the only means in or out of the room and trapping the doctor inside.
Dang.
The power was not able to be restored to the containment cell for another 18 hours, at which point the doctor was finally removed from the cell. The doctor sobbed uncontrollably as he kept repeating that he could feel them crawling all over him.
Oh, no.
The doctor was required to attend mandatory psychological therapy for his newly developed arachnophobia and was later reassigned. Following this incident, the examination protocol was updated, and health checkups of the D-class personnel are now performed by a doctor who is accompanied in the cell by 2 security personnel, each of whom are equipped with 2 250-watt flashlights that can be used in the event of another disruption to the lights.
Right.
If at any time a staff member is bitten by one of the spiders, they are to be immediately placed within SCP-538's containment cell as soon as possible, as the failure to properly contain them could easily lead to a massive containment breach by SCP-538 entities. Bitten individuals will often attempt to hide the fact that they are bitten, so anyone who comes into contact with the shadow spiders must be carefully monitored for signs of any of the symptoms that follow a bite.
Fingers crossed.
The ease with which they could quickly spread and the huge threat they pose to humanity has led to SCP-538 being classified as Euclid. And while the Foundation hopes that they have been successfully contained, we all must remain ever vigilant of movement on the edge of shadows. Should you spot something, don't take any chances. Your future non-liquefied body will thank you for it.
Oh God, man, this is creepy, bro. The thought, like, being able to see spiders is already kind of fear-inducing, right? If you couldn't even see them, or there were only shadows of spiders that had that type of effect on you, it'd be even worse. Guys, I hope you liked it. Dr. Bob, make sure to check his channel out, as well as a couple other videos that I reacted to. Thanks so much for watching. As always, this is Zueljin signing off. We'll see you next time.